I caught a glimpse of her hand brushing against his under the dinner table, and for the first time in my life, I wished I was blind. That moment has been playing on loop in my head ever since, like an old VHS tape I can't eject from the player. My wife, the woman I had built a life with over 2 decades, wasn't just drifting away from me, she was drifting towards someone else. But the part that twisted the knife deeper than I ever thought possible, that someone else wasn't just another man. It was my daughter's partner. My name's David, I'm 48, and I've spent my entire adult life here in Dallas, Texas. I work in HVAC installation, honest work, decent pay, nothing glamorous, but enough to keep food on the table, keep the lights on, and take the family out for barbecue on Sundays. I've always been more of a Bud Light on the porch type than a champagne at the Ritz kind of guy, and honestly, that's all I ever wanted. Simple, steady, American life. For years, that's exactly what I thought I had with Rebecca, my wife. Rebecca and I met in a place you wouldn't call romantic by anyone else's standards, an old diner off Highway 75, the kind with vinyl booths that squeaked when you slid in and a jukebox that only half worked. She was waiting tables after her community college classes, and I was grabbing coffee before a long shift. She laughed when I accidentally spilled creamer all over the counter, and that laugh, God, that laugh, hooked me. We started talking, and before I knew it, I was showing up at that diner every evening, pretending I just needed another cup of coffee, but really just needing to see her. Our courtship was nothing fancy. Friday night football games at the high school stadium, road trips down to Austin with the windows rolled down and country songs blaring, Saturday mornings spent flipping pancakes in the kitchen while she stole bites off my plate. I proposed at a 4th of July cookout, fireworks bursting behind us like the universe was giving its blessing. Back then, she was everything I could have asked for. Kind, loyal, and most of all, family-oriented. We raised our daughter Emily in that same spirit. She grew up with soccer games, birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese, and long summers at the lake. Rebecca was the kind of mom who always had juice boxes in her purse and could whip up a Halloween costume overnight. And for the longest time, I thought she was the perfect wife too. We had our ups and downs, every couple does, but nothing that ever made me question her loyalty, not until those small cracks started to show. It began so subtly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have brushed it off. Rebecca started dressing up more often, not just for church or special dinners, but even for errands. She'd buy new perfume, say it was on sale, but she wouldn't wear it around me. She kept her phone closer than usual, setting it face down on the table, slipping it into her back pocket when I walked into the room. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, we'd been married for over 20 years, built a home together, and shared countless memories. Why would she throw that away? But then came the dinner. Emily had been dating this young man, Josh, for about a year by then. He was polite, respectful, and even helped me replace the brake pads on my truck once. I never imagined he'd be the source of my undoing. That night, as we sat around the dining table, me carving roast beef, Emily chatting about her classes, Rebecca smiling a little too wide, I noticed it. Rebecca's hand brushed Josh's under the table. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things, but then I caught it again. This subtle electricity between them, the way she leaned just a little too close when he spoke, the way his eyes flickered nervously toward her. I tried to shake it off, told myself maybe it was nothing, maybe she was being friendly, maybe I was reading too much into it. But the seed had been planted, and once it's there, suspicion doesn't die. It grows, twisting itself around every thought, every glance, every late-night errand. The following weeks, I noticed more. Rebecca's absences became frequent. She claimed she was helping her sister with home renovations, but I called her sister once, and she seemed confused. She covered quickly, but the tone was off. Then there were the late-night texts, the hushed phone calls where she'd step onto the porch, thinking I was asleep. I wasn't. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of her voice outside, my stomach churning. What made it worse was Emily's joy. She was happy with Josh, glowing every time she spoke about him. How could I ruin that for her by voicing the unthinkable? That maybe her mother, her role model, the woman she looked up to, was betraying not just me, but her too? I held it in, swallowed the bile, and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But every day it became harder to ignore. Rebecca grew distant from me in ways I couldn't explain. She avoided intimacy, deflected conversations, and when I'd press her, she'd snap back with irritation I hadn't seen before. It was like living with a stranger. The night that cemented my fears came when I found her purse lying open on the couch. Inside was a hotel key card. The logo wasn't local. It was from a place out in Fort Worth. She claimed she hadn't been out that way in months. I didn't confront her then, but something in me cracked. A man can only deny reality for so long before it smacks him in the face. I started paying attention in ways I never had, checking credit card statements, gas receipts, even syncing the iPad to her iMessages when she forgot to log out. And what I saw, though blurry, fragmented, was enough to tell me my worst fears weren't just paranoia. There was something going on. Still, the gravity of it, the idea that it could actually be Josh, my daughter's partner, felt too grotesque, too impossible to fully accept. But Rebecca's behavior, Josh's nervous glances, and that gnawing instinct in my gut all pointed toward the same unbearable truth. One evening, Rebecca came home later than usual, hair disheveled, excuses tumbling out of her mouth like coins from a slot machine. I didn't argue. I just looked at her, silent, and something in my eyes must have unsettled her because she froze mid-sentence. That was the night I knew. I didn't have the proof yet, but the truth was already there, hanging between us like smoke in the air after a fire. And then, just as suddenly as the cracks began, she was gone. Rebecca disappeared one morning, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note about needing time to think. Weeks turned into months. Emily was distraught, I was numb, and life felt like it had been split in two, before the betrayal and after. But months later, when I thought the storm had passed, when I thought maybe she'd never come back, she did. And she wasn't alone. She came back pregnant. The morning Rebecca reappeared is etched into my memory like a scar. I was sipping burnt diner coffee at Lou's, the kind of place where the same old men gather every morning to argue about football stats and the weather, when she walked through the glass door. It wasn't just that she was back after months of silence. It was her stomach. Round, undeniable, pregnant. My first thought wasn't even about the betrayal. It was about the timeline. It didn't add up, not for me. She saw me before I could slip out, and the way she froze told me she hadn't planned this encounter. Her hand instinctively moved over her belly, protective, defensive. I set down my mug, the coffee suddenly tasting like ash, and walked out without saying a word. I wasn't ready, not yet. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with the TV on mute, watching Rebecca unpack the few things she had brought back. She moved through the house like it wasn't hers anymore, careful, quiet, like a guest. I asked her point blank, "Whose is it?" She hesitated, bit her lip, and muttered something about needing time. That was all I needed to hear. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't saying it was mine. From that moment on, my life became an investigation. I wasn't going to let gaslighting, excuses, or half-truths cloud my judgment anymore. I needed evidence, something concrete to hold in my hands. The first crack came from something as simple as a receipt. I found it stuffed in the pocket of her jeans, tossed carelessly into the laundry. A Holiday Inn in Fort Worth. One night stay. 2 meals charged to the room, date stamped right in the middle of the month she'd been gone. I stared at it under the kitchen light like it was a confession. She had never been to Fort Worth for work, never mentioned a conference, and her sister sure as hell didn't live out that way. I started keeping a folder in the bottom drawer of my desk, hidden under tax papers she never touched. Into it went the receipt. Then came another piece, a gas station receipt from Arlington, same weekend as the Holiday Inn stay. The car wasn't mine. She must have borrowed or rented. I checked the mileage on her SUV. It lined up with trips she wasn't supposed to be taking. I knew I couldn't do this half-heartedly. So, I synced the iPad again, praying she hadn't changed her Apple ID. Luck, or maybe fate, was on my side. Her iMessages rolled in like poisoned fruit. Late-night conversations with someone saved only as J. They weren't explicit, not in words, but the tone was enough. Wish I could see you again soon. Last night was perfect. She won't suspect a thing. My chest tightened. Emily, it had to be Josh. Still, I needed more than gut instinct and vague texts. People don't believe suspicions. They believe evidence. That's when I swallowed my pride and drove to Best Buy, buying a 79er baby monitor camera, the kind disguised as a picture frame. I set it up in the guest room, where Rebecca often slipped away to nap. For days, it caught nothing but her folding laundry, talking on the phone. Then, one Friday afternoon, the camera recorded her scrolling through her messages, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She typed quickly, giggled, then held the phone against her chest like it was a lifeline. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone. My hands shook as I scrolled, heart pounding, but the lock screen popped open with her old code, our daughter's birthday. I found hidden photos in a deleted folder she hadn't cleared out. A selfie of Josh, shirtless, grinning into the camera. Another of Rebecca in a hotel bathroom mirror, wearing a robe that clearly wasn't hers. And the final nail, a blurry shot of the two of them together, side by side in what looked like that Fort Worth Holiday Inn room. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so badly the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. My wife, my daughter's partner, my family tree twisted into something grotesque. The next morning, I added everything to the folder. The receipts, the screenshots, the camera footage, the hotel key card, my little box of truth. I knew that once I opened it for Emily, for anyone, there would be no going back. Lives would shatter, but living in denial was no longer an option. Rebecca must have sensed the change in me. She started avoiding me altogether, spending more time locked in the bedroom, claiming pregnancy exhaustion. Emily, bless her heart, tried to cheer her up, planning baby showers, talking about new beginnings, unaware of the darkness behind it all. Every time she mentioned Josh, her eyes lit up with trust, and it gutted me. She didn't know, she didn't suspect. She was in love with a man who had betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. One night, I sat in my truck outside Josh's apartment complex. His blinds were half open, and I watched him pace around his living room, phone pressed to his ear. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. Rebecca had left the house. No explanation. Just out for a bit. I didn't need to guess where. I followed her. The drive was automatic, like my hands knew what my heart refused to accept. Sure enough, she pulled up to Josh's place, parking far enough away to pretend it was coincidence. She didn't knock. She walked straight in, like she belonged there. I stayed in the truck, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm in, demand answers, drag them both into the street for everyone to see. But another part of me knew patience was my ally. If I wanted to bring the truth crashing down without question, I needed to let them hang themselves with their own rope. The breaking point came not with another hotel receipt or a blurry photo, but with something far more damning. Rebecca's medical file. She had left a hospital envelope in the kitchen by mistake, thinking she'd tucked it away. Curiosity, or desperation, made me open it. Inside were prenatal records, including the estimated conception date. My eyes scanned the paper until they landed on the words that changed everything. Estimated conception 19 weeks ago. I did the math. 19 weeks ago, Rebecca wasn't with me. She was already gone, already staying out in Fort Worth, already vanishing for days at a time. The timeline sealed it. The baby wasn't mine. It couldn't be. I tucked the file into my folder, added a sticky note with the date circled in red ink. The folder was thick now, heavy like a weapon waiting to be used. I looked at it, at the pile of truth I had built, and felt both powerful and hollow. Because once I dropped that bomb, nothing would ever be the same. That night, as Rebecca slept peacefully in the next room, I stared at the ceiling again, the weight of it pressing down. I wasn't just holding evidence of betrayal. I was holding the power to detonate my family. And I knew the moment was coming when I'd have to pull the pin. The day I decided to confront them wasn't planned. It came like a storm you see gathering on the horizon. Inevitable, dangerous, impossible to stop. I had my folder, swollen with receipts, photos, medical records, and screenshots. Every piece of paper in there felt like a nail for the coffin of the life I once thought was unshakable. The perfect opportunity arrived in the most ordinary setting, Sunday dinner. Emily had insisted on inviting Josh over, still oblivious to the truth, still glowing with the kind of innocent trust that only made this betrayal sting worse. Rebecca agreed too quickly, smoothing her dress over her stomach as if she wanted to flaunt what she carried inside. I cooked like it was any other family dinner, pot roast, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob. But inside, my blood was boiling. I watched Rebecca and Josh steal glances at each other across the table, their movements clumsy in their attempts to hide. Every laugh, every brush of her hand against his wrist felt like another slap to my face. Emily was chatting about her classes, her future plans, her excitement about Josh maybe moving in closer to campus with her. My daughter was planning a life with this man, not knowing he was already entangled in one with her mother. My chest ached just looking at her, the innocence she still had. Halfway through dinner, I stood. My hands were steady, though my heart was pounding. "I've got something to share," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the conversation. Rebecca froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Josh shifted uncomfortably, his face draining of color. I walked to the counter and picked up the folder. It was thick, the kind of folder that screams evidence. I laid it flat on the dining table, the thud echoing louder than it should have. Emily blinked at it, confused. Rebecca's hand trembled slightly as she set her fork down. Josh coughed into his napkin. "This," I said, opening the folder, "is the truth." The first thing I slid across the table was the hotel receipt. Holiday Inn, Fort Worth, date 19 weeks ago. I let the silence hang. Emily looked from me to her mother, waiting for some kind of denial. Rebecca said nothing. Then I laid out the prenatal records. Conception date, 19 weeks ago. "You weren't even living here, Rebecca." My voice was calm, steady, the way a judge sounds when reading a sentence. Emily's eyes widened. She glanced at her mom, then at Josh. Her lips trembled. "Wait, what?" I didn't stop. I pulled out the screenshots of messages, the selfies, the blurred photo of Rebecca and Josh together in the hotel room. "She's not just pregnant, Emily. She's pregnant by him." I pointed at Josh, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Emily's chair screeched against the floor as she stood, face pale, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom, tell me this isn't real, please." Rebecca opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Josh, desperate, and that was her mistake. That glance, that tiny flicker of connection, told Emily everything. She let out a sob that cut through me like a blade. "You slept with him?" Emily's voice cracked, raw with disbelief. "With my boyfriend?" Rebecca finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Emily, it wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean—" "Don't you dare," Emily snapped, her voice suddenly fierce. "Don't you dare tell me it wasn't supposed to happen." Josh tried to speak, stammering, "Emily, But she cut him off, her hand flying across his face with a slap so sharp it made the glasses on the table rattle. The room was chaos now. Emily sobbing, Rebecca reaching for her, Josh cowering in shame. I stood there, calm in the storm, folder still open, evidence spread like a crime scene. "This, I said evenly, "is what betrayal looks like, not just to me, but to our daughter." Rebecca turned to me, tears streaming. "David, please, we can fix this." "No," I said coldly. "You broke this. You broke all of us." Emily grabbed her phone, her hands shaking. I'm done. I'm done with both of you." She ran upstairs, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Josh followed, trying to plead, but I stepped into his path. "Sit down," I said, my voice steel. For the first time, he obeyed me. Rebecca crumbled into her chair, sobbing into her hands. The woman I once loved looked like a stranger, like someone caught red-handed, not sorry for what she'd done, but sorry she'd been exposed. I let the silence stretch until the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Then I gathered the folder, sliding the papers back inside, neat and deliberate. "I'll be calling a lawyer tomorrow," I said, my tone final. "Rebecca, I'll expect you out of this house by the end of the week." "Josh," I leaned down, my eyes level with his. "You're finished here. Don't ever come near my daughter again." His mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance. I slammed the folder shut, the sound like a gavel coming down in court. It was done. The verdict was read. Rebecca reached across the table, but I pulled back. "Don't," I warned. "You don't get to touch me anymore." The humiliation in that room was complete. Rebecca, exposed in front of her family. Josh, stripped of Emily's trust, reduced to a coward in his girlfriend's father's home. And Emily, innocent no longer, her illusions shattered in one brutal evening. I left them there, in the wreckage of their choices, and walked outside into the night air. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. I lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years, the smoke filling my lungs like old poison. Behind me, through the window, I could still see Rebecca's silhouette, her shoulders hunched, Josh sitting like a scolded child, Emily's door upstairs locked tight. The family I thought I had was gone, but at least now there were no more lies. The truth was out, and with the truth came the end. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt like a war zone after the bombs stopped falling, quiet, but the air still thick with smoke. Rebecca's suitcase sat by the door, half-zipped, clothes spilling out like guts. She avoided my eyes, moving mechanically, as if she knew there was no room left for begging or excuses. Emily hadn't come out of her room all night. The only sounds were muffled sobs and the creak of floorboards when she paced. I brewed coffee the way I always did, black and strong, but it tasted different now. Bitter, sharp, like the end of something. When Rebecca finally left, slipping out without even a goodbye, it was as if a weight lifted off the house, a poisonous weight. She climbed into her sister's car, belly round under her coat, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel compelled to chase after her. I just let the door close. The following weeks were brutal. Emily barely spoke to me. She spent most of her time at her friend's apartment near campus, trying to piece herself back together. I gave her space, though it killed me. I wanted to hold her, tell her she'd be okay, but I also knew she needed to grieve. She'd lost more than a boyfriend. She'd lost her faith in her own mother. That cut deeper than anything. The divorce moved quickly once I put my lawyer on it. Rebecca didn't fight. Maybe she knew she had no ground to stand on, or maybe she was too consumed with her pregnancy to care. Papers slid across desks, pens scratched signatures, and 22 years of marriage dissolved into legal jargon. We split assets. She took some savings, I kept the house. She asked about custody arrangements, but Emily was already grown, and I made it clear I wouldn't be responsible for a child that wasn't mine. Some nights were hard. I'd sit on the porch with a Bud Light, staring at the quiet street, wondering how the hell my life had veered off this track. The neighbors waved politely, unaware of the storm inside my walls. I'd flip on ESPN, the low murmur of commentators filling the silence, just to avoid hearing the echo of her laugh that still haunted the hallways. But healing came in small, almost invisible ways. One Saturday, Emily came back home. She walked into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes tired, and without a word, she started making pancakes. The same recipe Rebecca used to make when Emily was a kid. We ate together at the table, syrup dripping, coffee steaming, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of peace in her eyes. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Sometimes silence can heal more than words. Over time, the house began to feel like mine again. I hung new curtains, painted the bedroom walls, even rearranged the living room furniture. It wasn't about redecorating, it was about reclaiming space that had been contaminated. The folder of evidence sat in the safe, no longer a weapon, but a relic, a reminder of what lies can do to a family. Rebecca tried reaching out once, a month after the divorce was finalized. She called late at night, her voice fragile. "David, can we talk? Maybe meet for coffee?" I let her words hang in the air, then ended the call without answering. There are some bridges you don't rebuild. Emily eventually cut Josh out completely. She blocked his number, deleted his photos, and focused on finishing her degree. She came home more often, and we rebuilt slowly. Saturday breakfasts, Sunday walks, late-night talks on the porch. The wound was still there, but scar tissue formed. Stronger, tougher. One evening, she handed me a drawing she'd done in one of her classes. Two figures sitting side by side on a porch swing, the sky behind them glowing orange. "Us," she said simply. I pinned it to the fridge, and every time I saw it, I remembered why I chose peace over revenge. Not because Rebecca didn't deserve it, she did, but because Emily deserved better than watching her father consumed by anger. Life found a rhythm again. Work, home, quiet dinners, football games on TV. Simple, steady, American life. The kind I'd always wanted. There was no dramatic closure, no grand gesture, just the slow healing that comes from choosing peace, day after day. Sometimes, when I sit on the porch with a cold Bud Light and hear the distant sound of kids riding bikes down the street, I think about Rebecca. I wonder if she's holding her new baby, if she ever feels the sting of what she threw away. But those thoughts don't linger long. They pass like smoke. Because at the end of the day, I didn't just lose a wife. I shed a weight. I found freedom. I found quiet. I found myself again. And if there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's simple. Sometimes the trash takes itself out.